Pecha Kucha 148, Scarlet Witch, and Invincible Iron Man, Ironheart. So it's another week of me not doing anything while I continue to work and not draw. My hands are getting worse, but I have agreed with my employers to kind of reduce my hours, although the weekend wasn't promising. But anyway, comic books. So Scarlet Witch seems to be a collection of solo stories from several decades. Following after the Ultron book I read last week, I expected this to be pretty bad, but it's not. There's an incredible amount of potential, and some of these stories are very, very interesting. It starts with the Scarlet Witch having a dream of basically a planet being conquered and brutalized by some evil magical entity. It's a prophetic dream because she's magic, and it turns out that it's her from another universe wrecking shit. There's also her interacting with some of the other Avengers. US Agent, who's totally not Captain America, is like physically training her and stuff, which has helped a lot of Avengers, actually, Iron Man specifically, to deal with situations outside of their control. But I always like seeing team books where the teammates actually work together. Scarlet Witch ends up going to some spooky place, and underneath it there are stuff that it seems a bit like the whole Lovecraftian architecture. Massive pillars of unknown origin and evil magic and stuff. There's a very strong horror element in this story where, like, some of the other Avengers get turned into monsters, where Spider-Woman gets turned into a Spider-Woman. And this is one of the many instances where I think if you took the same script and updated it by today's artistic standards, this could be a very, very compelling book. So evil Scarlet Witch from another universe ultimately is destroyed by all the other Scarlet Witches she's conquered in her universe, destroying Rampage. And this is a story that shows what she could be if she wasn't a third-rate Avenger, if she was in the Constantine thing. And there's a one-shot where she meets Death, who is in the form of a human man who is in love with a woman because he's never got to experience this. It's all very esoteric and interesting. And these are the kind of stories you can get away with when no editorial isn't looking. But when they are, you get this kind of stuff where Scarlet Witch gets pulled out of her body, goes back in time into one of her ancestors' bodies, and becomes a pirate because Saturday morning kids shows need filler. And so do comic books in the 90s, apparently. Although this probably still isn't the 90s, judging from the colouring. And then there's a story about when Wanda was young, and she's like raised as a gypsy. And this is interesting because nobody likes gypsies, nobody likes mutants. You could play with the whole isolation thing. And the story is also about her meeting a coven of mages, so you could play with the magic thing and get away from her being a mutant. And then there's another story which is it's about Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch effectively meeting Magneto for the first time. Nothing really happens, but that's what do you expect in stories set in the past. But the art's good and Magneto shows up. So, Invincible Iron Man. Tony Stark is AWOL. Riri Williams, 15-year-old black girl, is the new Iron Man. And this was in 2016, so I doubt she still is. But she was for a while, at the very least. And in typical comic book style, there's nothing original here. Her backstory is literally the Punisher's backstory. She has a picnic, her family gets killed, but not all of them, only half of them. And this kind of is her hero's journey trauma thing. She's also a super genius, and Tony Stark's AI ghost helps her get techno hench, for the lack of a better word. So even though Tony Stark's not here, you've got to throw the fans some kind of bone, because at the end of the day, there's only one type of person buying an Iron Man book, and that's Iron Man fans. And they're fans of Tony Stark. Right. Stark's company is being run by AI or something, or his mother, who has come from nowhere, and she's like a musician. And this dude with the beard wants to take over because he's the CEO, but he can't. And then there's a fight on the rooftop with Gimp ninjas where Pepper Potts and Riri don't have their armor and fight ninjas without their armor like it's Daredevil, which suspends my disbelief to breaking point. I'm kind of like, aren't we here to see giant robot fights? And then there's a fight with swords where Riri remembers that her dad was going to train her to use a sword, but then she didn't want to do it and then he died. I'm not quite sure what Bendis was going for with this flashback. It's almost like she's regretting the bonding, but then it's almost like a comedy skit. I don't know. And then in true Tony Stark fashion, his AI at the end decides he's going to be evil because Tony Stark, if you wrote him with any credible realism, would eventually become evil because he's a businessman and he was evil from the start. Not bad. By Bendis' standards, pretty good. The art's fantastic, but it's a hardback comic book that's very thin and very expensive. The story itself ultimately is okay, but if you're trying to get new people to cotton on to a new Iron Man, who isn't a man, this isn't going to work. Sad clown of the week is Britain. Well, I guess just England and Wales, right? Because Boris Johnson isn't the King of Scotland. Not yet, right? He's working on it. This guy is in charge. And I still think he's better than Corbyn, but god damn it. I mean, like most people, I don't have anything specifically against Boris Johnson. He's scandalous, but that's probably why he's so popular. Trump calls him Britain Trump because that's a real phrase. Is he going to be able to fuck anything up worse than Theresa May or David Cameron? It remains to be seen. But how many prime ministers have we now had in a row who have not been voted in by the public? I guess the real sad clown of the fucking day is democracy. Anyway, that brings us to the end of Pecha Kucha 148, and I will see you next time.